Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the second to last webinar in the Community Science LI webinar series. We're so excited to have you all joining us today. My name is Ariel Santos, and I will be moderating today's webinar. For those of you who are new to Community Science LI, the goal of this series is to highlight various community science opportunities around Long Island and how the data accumulated by the public influences local environmental management efforts. This project was created in partnership between SeaTuck Environmental Association and Long Island Sound Study. SeaTuck is a nonprofit 501c3 organization dedicated to conserving Long Island wildlife and the environment. Long Island Sound Study is a cooperative effort involving researchers, regulators, user groups, and other concerned organizations and individuals to protect and improve the health of Long Island Sound. So together with the support from the Peconic Estuary Partnership and the South Shore Estuary Reserve, we bring you Community Science LI. So I just wanted to go over some housekeeping notes, though I'm sure you all are more than familiar with how this works at this point. This webinar and all future webinars are being recorded. All of the recordings will be available at SeaTuck's website shortly after the webinar concludes. Your video and microphones are turned off, but you are free to ask questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. You're more than welcome to utilize the chat box as well to add any comments or say hello, of course, but we will be monitoring the Q&A closely to answer any questions during the presentations and after during the dedicated Q&A period. So with that, I would like to introduce today's panelists. So we have Jimena Perez Vizcasillas, Long Island Sound Study Outreach Coordinator and co-host of Community Science LI. She will be paying close attention to the Q&A and helping me moderate today. We have Nancy Grant, Director of Programs for Friends of Flax Pond, who will discuss the studies occurring in Flax Pond and at West Meadow Beach as part of their effort to assess the health of local terrapin populations. We have Gabrielle Scanzo, Friends of Flax Pond intern and University of Tampa student, who will share her findings from her research participating in the terrapin nesting survey over the last 3 years. Next, there's John Turner, Senior Conservation Policy Advocate for SeaTuck, who will talk about terrapin biology, ecology, and natural history of terrapins on Long Island. And finally, myself, Ariel Santos, Policy Program Coordinator, also of SeaTuck, and I will go over our Community Science Terrapin Watch Survey. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then John, you can take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Ariel. I'm not sure what ado is, but without further ado, we will begin. I'd like to welcome everybody as well to the presentation. Appreciate your interest in Diamondback terrapins. They are a iconic species, certainly here on Long Island, and one that has gotten a great deal of attention over the past couple of years, and hopefully more attention as time goes on. So what I'm going to do is just really launch into this presentation, because I'm going to be trying to fit what is typically a half an hour or maybe slightly longer presentation to about 15 minutes. So we should begin. I like to call the terrapin, the turtle with the clown lips, because this particular reptile has got a pretty distinctive face, and its beak, both of the upper part and lower part, is really distinctive. Often a pretty significant color contrast with the rest of the animal, making the beak and the mouth really stand out. Let me go on to the next. So they do have clown lips, and in fact, some humans really get carried away with their own lips as it relates to their enthusiasm for Diamondback terrapins. Next slide, please. The Diamondback terrapin is truly a stunning reptile, a little bit biased perhaps, but I think that's hard pressed to find a more beautiful turtle on Long Island. They really are individually marked. You can identify often, pretty much all the time, a terrapin individually based on the different patterns of the dots and scrawls on their skin, as well as the patterns on their scute. And the name, the scientific or Latin name, Malaclemys terrapin, means really mollusk-eating turtle, and that really is an accurate name, because they certainly will eat mollusks of various types as a key part of their diet. The common name Diamondback terrapin comes from the diamond-shaped scutes on the carapace. Next one, please. The terrapin really is a coastal hugging species. It is distributed pretty much from Cape Cod south all the way over to close to the country line or national line, national boundary, I should say, between Mexico and the United States. I think they pinch out just around a place called Laguna Atascosa because I think the uh, the the lagoons there just become a little bit too saline for them, so it's a little bit short of truly the Mexican boundary. But nevertheless, they've got a wide distribution down the East Coast, all around Florida, all the way across the Gulf of Mexico coast as well. And right now, scientists have documented or have basically established the fact that there are 7 different subspecies of terrapins that exist that can be subtly differentiated by different morphological characteristics. In New York, not surprisingly, since it does hug the coast, it is restricted almost entirely in New York State to Long Island and a little bit up the Hudson River. That is the tidally influenced portions of the Hudson. And these yellow quadrangles that you see is a result of a major work that was undertaken by the New York State DEC years ago called the Amphibian and Reptile Atlas, where they tried to document the distribution and occurrence of all of the reptiles and amphibians found in the state of New York. And the quadrangles that you see in yellow are places where people reported the occurrence of Diamondback terrapins. And that's important because we'll get back to that at the end and what we hope to be able to gain your assistance on in furthering that work. It is a coast hugging species. And so that means they typically found in brackish water environments. That is water that is in between fresh and fully salty, like the open ocean. They are found, not surprisingly, then in brackish water environments, that being tidal marshes, tidal creeks, shallow lagoons, mud flats, sand flats, where they will congregate. I'm going to pass by this one because it goes into some detail, but to point out that terrapins do have a series of pretty interesting anatomical and physiological features or facts about them. Maybe the most interesting one here to quickly talk about is the top one about the glands they have. Being found in again a brackish environment with salt water, they have to have ways to excrete salt, and so they are able to actually excrete salt through these glands that they have. So let's just skip the rest and we go back. It is recorded, so if you want to go back and read that information further down, feel free to please do so. Most people's experience with terrapins, not surprisingly, is during the nesting season, which we're entering into now, and Nancy and Gabrielle will talk much more about that in a couple of minutes. But terrapins generally emerge in this time of year in early to mid-June, right through July. And they, not surprisingly, will typically lay their eggs in suitable habitat adjacent to the saltwater embayments that they are found in during the rest of the year. They often lay several clutches, and those clutches can range anywhere from just a few eggs to more than a dozen and a half. The typical incubation period is anywhere from 2 to 3 months, depending on a variety of factors, one of which is how warm the nest is and how exposed it is, which can heat up the eggs or shorten the incubation process. We're going to skip this particular video because Nancy's got a similar video that shows the egg laying experience. So again, for the sake of time, we're going to move on. And during the nesting season, they do wander and sometimes will wander distances. And in fact, the most problematic wandering that they experience is at JFK Airport, where every year, invariably, several to many female terrapins come out onto the tarmac, sometimes out onto the runways, where they could pose a risk to planes that are landing, and of course pose a risk very much to themselves about the possibility of getting crushed. There has been, adjacent to JFK at Jamaica Bay, a very long ongoing study about various facets or aspects of terrapin biology and ecology undertaken by that person to the right in the lower right-hand photograph, and that's Dr. Russell Burke from Hofstra University, who is measuring the uh, uh, the bottom shell of the plastron of a female terrapin. One of the interesting aspects about terrapins is just the extent to which the males and females look different. We call it sexual dimorphism. You probably are familiar with that with birds pretty regularly. If you think of a male and a female red-winged blackbird, they look very, very different. That's less so true in with regard to reptiles and amphibians, but in a few cases it does hold, and that's the case with regard to terrapins. The females are much larger and weigh a great deal more than do the males, and the males have longer tails than do the females, which is used during the mating process to try to hold on. Their diet is varied, and it includes mostly, hard-bodied animals, and that's again where those clown lips that they have, the very strong, beaks that enable them to relatively easily crush these hard objects, so that they can ingest food. They also will eat mussels, which I haven't listed here, but they're known to eat other bivalves such as rib mussels and blue mussels, along with the species that you see here. And in fact, it's thought that they play an important role in helping to kind of maintain the overall ecological balance of a salt marsh, because marsh periwinkles, and I think to a lesser extent common periwinkles, can actually graze upon salt marsh grasses, damaging them. And if they were left unchecked, they may actually cause damage to salt marsh environments, but they're kept in check to some extent because they're preyed upon by terrapins. Well, the terrapins eat a lot of different things, and in fact, at one time, we ate terrapins quite readily. And if you go back just a century, or actually less than a century, it wasn't at all unusual in which thousands to tens of thousands of terrapins were harvested every year to be made into either a terrapin stew or terrapin soup. And again, it was a very, very popular dish. A lot of recipes one can find online about this, and you just see that text below to give you some sense about just how many terrapins could be taken. That in 1891, in just one state, Maryland, 58,000 females were captured to be made into a stew. Fortunately, Prohibition hit, and that kind of was their saving grace, because sherry, a type of alcohol, is used in making terrapin stew. And with that during Prohibition, they were given a respite and have bounced back a bit from that ever since. Okay. Terrapins are a bit of a cultural icon. If we have anybody who's listening in or participating knows somebody who went to the University of Maryland, or perhaps themselves a graduate, they know that the phrase of "fear the turtle." It is a mascot of great notoriety in the University of Maryland, and you can buy all different paraphernalia if you're so inclined. And of course, the very good album put out, my goodness, almost half a century ago now, by the Grateful Dead, called Terrapin Station. So let's just quickly run through some of the threats and solutions that terrapins face. They are an animal that does confront a lot of different challenges, one of which was, again, being taken out of the environment and killed for food. We worked with others to try to close that loophole, or close the ability of people to legally harvest terrapins. That did occur in 2017 when the DEC implemented a regulation. So terrapins no longer can be legally harvested. That does not mean that there isn't poaching that goes on. We just heard of a poaching incident in Jamaica Bay last week, in which some people were caught with, I think, close to 50 terrapins that they were planning on, converting into stew, but they were caught and the turtles were returned. They do drown often in crab pots, blue claw crabs, which co-inhabit the same environments where the terrapins are found. The terrapins are attracted to the crab pots because of either the bait or the crabs that are in the pots, and they'll go in and they cannot find their way out. And even though terrapins can breathe for stay underwater for a long time, they eventually have to surface because they are, of course, air-breathing animals. So these orange devices that you see called TEDs, which is an acronym for Terrapin Excluded Devices, can be put on the entrances to crab pots and prevent most terrapins from being able to gain access to the crab pots. Excuse me. The CTUC, Environmental Association, work with others to try to get the DEC to implement a regulation which has been adopted by law to require TEDs on crab pots if these pots are put in shallow embayments. And that's the areas that are kind of colored in green here on this particular slide along the North Shore. So places like Stony Brook Harbor and Northport Harbor, Manhasset Bay, all along Peconic Bay and further places. Excuse me. Yeah. Sorry. And then along the South Shore as well. So we worked very much to try to get this regulation implemented, and it is now law that crab pots to get in those areas have to be equipped with terrapin excluded devices to try to minimize the ability of terrapins to get into these pots. Small terrapins still can, and studies that have been done in other places indicate about a 75 to 80% reduction in mortality. Another issue relating to pots that can pose a problem is the ghost fishing pots. There are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pots still found in the bottom of Long Island Sound when the lobster industry collapsed. And these pots still are involved in ghost fishing and unfortunately can attract terrapins, which then die, decompose, which can attract other things. And so a lot of terrapins can die in these ghost fishing pots. And one of the efforts we have underway is to try to secure funding to remove them. Next, please. And this is just a law about that we've worked with Assemblyman Engelbright to implement that would deal with that issue. Quickly, toxic algae blooms is another concern. Not going to go into detail here, but to simply say that due to excess nitrogen, which fuels different algae blooms, some of them can produce toxins, and terrapins can come out and feed upon, again, these snails, which are feeding upon the algae with fatal consequences. Another issue the terrapins have to deal with is excessive predation from their nests. As we've developed more and more Long Island, and that our suburban environment attracts predators, those predators can increase in abundance above what they would be, so to speak, normally, and that does not bode well for terrapins, as fox, skunk, raccoons can easily, if they detect the nest early and right after being laid, can go in and predate the nest. Shoreline hardening is yet another issue they face. That bulkhead on the left might be, as like to say, the Great Wall of China to a terrapin, and that environment that existed there one time, and the continuum between the bay and the sandy environment where the terrapin would come ashore and lay her eggs no longer is available to her. And so bulkheading and riprap is definitely, and the continuing shoreline hardening that goes on Long Island has adverse impacts to terrapins and horseshoe crabs and other species as well. Next, please. The issue I want to spend 1 minute on is the issue of roadkill. There are, not surprisingly, a lot of roads that run close to these coastal environments and habitats where terrapins are found. And not surprisingly, a lot of terrapins can move out onto the roadways and get hit. We on Long Island have been trying to implement projects. You can see that middle slide at the very top with in a lower left hand side with a drainage tubing that can run for 50, 75, 5,000 feet, just depending on the length and where it's relevant, to prevent female terrapins from gaining access and coming out into harm's way on the road. It's a fairly inexpensive, proven way to try to prevent terrapins from becoming roadkill. Next one. And at on Long Island here, we're involved in a project working with the Orient Beach State Park Administration. This is just yesterday. Terrapins were coming out onto the main road. If you know Orient Beach State Park, there's about 1.5 mile, 2 mile long road that you have to drive to get to the more active area where the playgrounds are. And terrapins cross over here routinely to nest. And these, again, just a few that I saw. I saw 3 terrapins just yesterday that were moving out into harm's way. So in an effort to try to address that, we have prepared 5,000 flyers or palm cards, double-sided palm cards that we have distributed two state parks just yesterday that they'll be handing out to the patrons as they enter and pay their toll. They're given this to try to put on their radar screen the fact that there are terrapins there, and to please be on the lookout as they drive down that road. Here's just again, we did this at Cedar Beach, that black tubing that they've used in New Jersey, quite effective. I've checked that pretty regularly, and we've not had any terrapins at all move out to harm's way on that road. That's Shore Road in Mount Sinai. In fact, when we were putting this tubing in with the Boy Scouts, here's one of the Boy Scout leaders, a female terrapin decided to pay us a visit and say hi as she was moving across the road to go lay her eggs. Not always the loss of, try to make a little bit of lemonade out of a lemon, the female terrapins that are fatally struck. We haven't done it here, but we may do it here. Certainly have done it in New Jersey where they can actually, you can take the eggs out if they're viable, incubate the eggs, and at least have the next generation of terrapins be released. And really lastly, the effort that really goes with those structures along the roads, you need to try to provide places where the terrapins will readily take to on the lee side, the side of the road you want to keep them on. And so they've done that in New Jersey and Massachusetts, and that's through establishing terrapin gardens, which is basically about an 18-inch layer, a bed of sand, anywhere from 20 to 30 feet long and wide. And terrapins will readily take to that if the sand is the right kind of composition, and they'll lay their eggs. You can see in the middle slide, up in Massachusetts, just how many terrapins took advantage of that terrapin garden that was put in. This is something we're doing in Orient, and it's been done at Jones Beach, and may play a greater role on Long Island, maybe at Nisqually River State Park as well in the coming years. So lastly, the climate change is the kind of the mother of all issues. We know that terrapins, like other reptiles, actually experience sex determination. Really, it's based on the temperature, and so if things heat up too much, you could see that the sex ratios could be skewered, and that's not a good thing. So that's really, I think, it for the presentation and the information I want to share with you. Maybe one more slide that shows, I think, a little bit about if you're more interested in getting involved in terrapin conservation and research, there's a formal organization called the Diamondback Terrapin Working Group up and down the East Coast. We do have a kind of a working group chapter on Long Island, as well as another chapter at the Northeast level. That, again, we encourage you, if you want to get involved, please feel free to do so. Bunch of wonderful people doing research, all with the folks that are trying to better understand terrapins and work to protect them. And if you want to better understand terrapins, there's two wonderful books that I encourage you to take a look at. The one on the left is a bit more technical, but still is fairly easy reading. And then Barbara Bredesel's book, Diamonds in the Marsh, A Natural History of the Terrapins, a wonderful book that, again, it is easy reading and really goes into great detail about terrapins that I encourage you to take a look at if we've, again, whetted your appetite about such things. So that's it. And I'd like to turn the presentation now back to Ariel, who is going to go into some detail about CTUC's Terrapin Watch survey.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, John. That was great. As John said, I'm going to go through CTUC's community science survey called the Terrapin Watch survey. And the goal of this survey is to generate information regarding distribution and populations of Diamondback terrapins on Long Island, to identify these potential hazardous road crossings to help mitigate terrapin mortality at these locations, record historical, current, and potential terrapin nesting sites to be reviewed for environmental management, and much more. So this is kind of a screenshot of what it looks like, but I'm going to take you through how to access this survey, which can be found on our website through a browser and also through the mobile field app, which is free and can be downloaded from, excuse me, any mobile app store. So I'm just going to switch my screen share here. Okay, can you see the website okay?
Yep.
Awesome, thank you. So this is CTUC's website. You can find it by searching ctuc.org. To get to our community science projects, you're gonna head over to Get Involved. community science projects, and head on down to Terrapin Watch. So the community science survey will always be held and embedded directly into this web page, as you can see here. So if you ever have trouble looking for it, or you can't find the link, it's always going to be housed here. So in the beginning, you can see it's just, basic information, full name, email, phone number, date, your observation location. We do recommend that you enable location services in your phone settings in order to record the most accurate location. You can have this setting enabled at all times or just while you're using the app, but we have found that this allows the most accurate record of your location. And then it asks, have you previously observed terrapins at this location? Yes or no? And then kind of an important question, are you currently observing terrapins? So based on how you answer this question, a different series of questions will follow. And this is basically just to simplify the survey and to reduce clutter. So if we say, we haven't observed, we're not observing terrapins currently, the questions that follow will be in reference to evidence of terrapin activity. So we're not witnessing turtles in action, but we do see tracks, we're witnessing test holes, and you could type in other evidence as well. We ask you to describe the habitat where you have found the evidence of the terrapin activity. And then there's some spots where you can select an image file from your phone or take a live photo using the camera icon. And then there's a notes section at the bottom here if you'd like to include any additional observations or ask us any questions. And if you were to hit yes, you are currently observing terrapins, then the questions that follow are in reference to how many terrapins are you seeing? What is the terrapin doing? What is the individual terrapin doing? Are they in the water? Is terrapin 2 moving towards water? Is terrapin 3 digging holes? So on and so forth. And then we want to know what the habitat looks like where you're witnessing this terrapin activity. And of course, there can also be evidence of terrapin activity. So you could see 2 terrapins swimming in the water and maybe some tracks on the sand. So we include those here as well. And then if you're witnessing more than 10 terrapins, we ask that you just write them out in here. It could just say terrapin 10 swimming in the water, because it does stop at 10 here. And then all of the rest of the information is exactly the same. You can add images, take a photo, and add notes. Once you're done with that, you just hit submit. So it's pretty easy. And like I said, this will always be on our webpage at ctuck.org. Or you can access the survey through the Survey 123 mobile field app. So first you must download the free Survey 123 mobile app on your mobile device. And then you can either scan the QR code, which is here. But if you're already on your mobile device, you're not going to be able to scan that QR code. So you would just click this link here. And I'm just going to quickly take you through the phone and how this all operates to get a better understanding of what that looks like. Okay, can you see my phone okay?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to use my camera icon, and then I'm going to hover over the QR code. So I'm not taking a photo of it, I'm just hovering above it. And now I'm just following the prompts. So if you haven't downloaded the mobile app yet, you can still open it in your browser by hitting the open in browser button, and then the survey will pop up. Or if you have downloaded that app, you could then hit open in the Survey 123 field app and then continue to follow the prompts. Open. And what's nice about this is that you do not need to have an ArcGIS Survey 123 login. You would just hit that third option on the bottom that says continue without signing in. And again, you have your survey here and you're all set to go. If you're not connected to Wi-Fi or you don't want to use mobile data while you're out in the field, you can always save a draft of your survey and submit it at a later time. You would just hit the X button at the top left corner, save in drafts. And as you could see in that Terrapin Watch survey in the top right corner, it just has this orange circle there that says, hey, you have a draft here. don't forget to submit me. And the cool thing about downloading the app is that if you're a community scientist who partakes or participates in a bunch of these surveys, like the annual river herring survey or BatMap Long Island, it's cool that you can have all of your surveys in one place. And if there's any updates, they'll automatically show up at the top of the screen and you just hit update this survey. And that's, you know, if you don't want this, the mobile app, that's fine too, but you would just have to go through different web pages to find that. But either one works. I just personally like the app and it's free. So I think that's it. We can quickly show you if you want to go through your phone and visit the website. You would just hit, like we did earlier, menu, get involved, Terrapin Watch. See that survey is there embedded in the web page. And now that I'm on my cell phone, of course, I can't scan that QR code. And this is where you would hit click here to download the Terrapin Watch survey. And then you get those same prompts to do what you had done before. And that is pretty much it. I know I went through that a little fast, but you guys will all have our contact information. And if you have any issues or questions about accessing or downloading the survey, you can just send me an email. And with that, we can hand it over to Nancy and Gabrielle if you guys would want to share your screen.
Okay. And I'm Nancy Grant. I'm the Director of Programs at the Friends of Flax Pond. And the Friends of Flax Pond is a grassroots organization that was started in 2004 by Wendy Fidao and some other concerned citizens in the Flax Pond area. We have a mission that says that we're here to promote stewardship, and we do this mainly by involving people in the environment and also sponsoring various projects and lectures. Our Diamondback Terrapin survey grew out of this, and we started by working with students. Our main activities include a winter lecture series, the Diamondback Terrapin nesting survey, and the Flax Pond Summer Research Institute, and some other things such as the Student Watershed Initiative, which was closed down, and others. The history of our study started in 2004 when the Friends was started, and at that point, some grad students were hired from Matt Droud's program at CW Post while I'm on university, and they patrolled the beaches mostly at night. There wasn't very much success, and the volunteers were mainly people who were directly involved with just the Friends of Flax Pond, which was rather small at the time. In 2008, we got a new coordinator, Rich Kurtz, and he consulted with Russell Burke, and we adopted his protocols for weekly depredation counts and searching the beach with small groups of volunteers at high tide on the new and full moon. And if turtles were found, they were collected, weighed, measured, notched, and released. And any nests that were found were protected with exposures. And we continued to build on this initial success and expand the program. This really expanded the volunteer base, which was key to us continuing. In 2012, we expanded the program to include daily searches. We went to an underground nest protection rather than the above ground cages, and expanded the use of volunteers. We were able to observe the hatching of nests, which facilitated us also protecting them. And in 2020 to present, we're currently starting drone surveillance with the help of the Wildlife Conservation Society. And this is really giving us an excellent way to assess the populations and their behaviors and range. In 2020, many closed down their programs, we continued by adapting what we did and following the CDC guidelines and working with the town to make sure that they were comfortable with what we were doing. We limited how many volunteers last summer, and we also did all our training for volunteers remotely, and people brought their own equipment and other things. Our study area is mainly West Meadow Beach and Wetlands Preserve. It's a town of Brookhaven facility. And what works very well for us is the fact that there is a barrier beach, which at one time had a number of cottages on it, and then a road, and then the marsh. The marsh is transected by the West Meadow Creek, and that's for the most part where our turtles live. They cross the roadway, the Trustees Road, which used to be open to traffic, but now it's just mostly walkers, bike riders, families strolling, and an occasional car or maintenance type vehicle. Okay, our protocols have evolved throughout the years, and adaptations were made to advance the ability of our citizen scientists to participate and collect accurate data. We have college student interns who help us train volunteers. They lead small teams in the field, enter and analyze data, and help plan and suggest ongoing upgrades and areas for further study. Our volunteers are also actively involved in the same pursuits. One example is the weather data and some of the things we have added: handheld anemometers, our temperature monitors. The last 3 years, we've had these hobo tidfoot temperature recorders. They do 24-hour graphs of air, water, and soil temperatures, which has been very, very helpful for us to really assess the activity patterns and how temperature may be affecting the start of our daily report sheets have also been adapted throughout the year to make them more user-friendly, and in cases where people have to guess at or estimate a wind speed, we give little parameters that help them decide. The wind direction is the same, and the same for tide, whether it's incoming or outgoing. We look for signs of activity which are recorded on that sheet you just saw, and amongst them are the signs of depredated nests, and then they're asked to say whether they think it's fox or raccoon have predated the nest. And if you look at the bottom left corner picture, you'll see a whole number of shredded eggs in the nest hole. What we've been doing is putting them back in the hole to try and trick the predators into thinking that it's another nest. We did it first as a fluke at one of the suggestions of our volunteers, and because it was repredated, we've now gone to coloring it with food coloring, and we seem to think that maybe we're keeping the fox and raccoon a little busy at night finding fake nests. We also record test holes, and the test holes we record is we wait till they get to a significant size, which is usually about 2.5 to 3 centimeters, no, inches in width, and they are very mechanical looking. It almost looks like someone took a bulb planter and pulled out a plug. It's amazing that they go that far and then walk away, but we've observed quite a few reasons why they might do that. Okay, so the other thing we're doing besides looking for the signs is looking for the terrapin themselves. We always observe from a distance, and because of the roadway there, you can see the volunteers are watching a terrapin cross the road. That's how we spent most of our morning, was watching terrapins pop out along the roadway, and also the walkers and bikers and people who are out enjoying the outdoors on the roadway there are always alerting us to terrapin that they're seeing on the road. We also have a system of road markings with little green colored turtles on the edge of the road with numbers. So people can tell us what numbers they saw the turtles by, because when they're walking, they don't realize they've walked as far as they have, and they tell us, oh, it's just, 5 feet away, and really it was more like 500 feet away. So we also tell people that it's very difficult to spot the turtles, and particularly when they're nesting. If a turtle is found, we let them, and we really caution people to stand back as far as you can, but let them follow their natural behavior. Give them an opportunity to find the nesting spot. And if she's heading to the water or an inaccessible spot, usually a clump of poison ivy, we take her picture and we don't pick it up. They notify us and we go and take care of it. So if a turtle is found and the team is called or we're contacted, we record the measurements on our special sheet that we have just for the collected turtles. And here we have a little map that everything can be noted on. And these are some of the points that we are looking at. And we take pictures, and we have some wonderful photographers who have now joined our ranks, who have greatly improved our photography. We look for anomalies such as markings on the shell. The one on the bottom left, it's actually almost like an acid burn on the shell. We have some with numbers etched into the shell. We have, this morning, one of the turtles we found had a major section of the shell, top carapace missing. And then, of course, there are notches. We have placed notches in some of the shells from 2008 to 2018. We only notched the turtles to mark them so that we could indicate them. But in 2018, we started using pit tags. And so now we have them, and we also notch for the year so that we know when they were first found. Okay. The nesting process, she usually looks around, puts her nose in the air, and will throw some sand in the air, usually with her front legs. And if she likes it, she will go back and she will turn around and start digging with her rear legs. That's the point at which she'll eventually get to that conical shape that we call a test hole if she walks away. She may dig quite a while and still not get to that point. Two of the turtles we saw this morning dug for 20 minutes and didn't make that hole, but I've seen them be able to make that in less than 3 to 5 minutes. Now, in the one video, the video on the bottom corner there, if you look very closely, you can see the egg actually being laid into the hole. It's a very short version. But she's balancing on 3 legs and gently caressing the egg and pushing it back into the hole. Now, up at the top left picture, you will see an egg actually coming out of a turtle. And now covering the nest portion. This is always very interesting too. And it involves her doing a little dance. First, she just starts with a few little scoops of the sand and pushing it down and in. And then when she gets a significant amount in, she does this little tamping dance. We had a music teacher that was putting it to music for us. It was quite funny. But these are things that you can see how she's being so careful in doing it. And that swishing and wide reach, she's sort of smoothing the sand out too, because when she gets done, you will not be able to tell where this nest is, even though you may have watched it. And now protecting the nests. In 2012, we had nests that were in the above ground enclosures that were stolen. So what we tried to do was devise ways to protect the nests from the animal predators. And at first we came up with cayenne pepper, but then it was almost a signal to the fox that it was there, that there was a nest, and I guess they sort of turned their head and dug anyway. So one of our volunteers came up with the idea of using underground netting. And so we remove layers of soil, we check for roots and insects, then we put one small 5x5 patch of the netting down, and the edges are quite sharp. So if a fox should get in it, it would be very painful. And then we have another layer that's held down with tent stakes, and then we cover it up so that it's at the original level that it was laid at. Okay. Now, when we have the opportunity to observe the babies, if at all possible, we weigh and measure them. And in some years, we were able to notch their shells, and we reserved that notched piece and have preserved it in alcohol for future DNA studies to determine the number of males that are involved in each nest. All right. Now, the results every year, our student volunteers and interns and grad assistants have come up with a number of different studies that they wanted. Plus, they also help us analyze the general data that we cover. So, Gabby, I'm going to turn this over to Gabby, who's going to present on behalf of many of the student interns we've had, and their names, they're credited on each slide.
The West Meadow population has remained fairly stable in terms of length and width. We will be adding the years 2018 through 2001, ascertain if this trend is continuing. There was no significant change in the plastron and carapace width and length. The carapace length of West Meadow beach turtles is statistically different from the United States population. The variation in mass from year to year can be attributed to some terrapin being weighed pre-nesting, while others are weighed post-nesting. In some cases, the females were weighed pre and post-nesting. This allowed us to calculate the range of weight in each clutch. The weight was between 100 and 220 grams. This is an idea of the distribution of nests for females whose nests were protected in many different years. This clearly illustrates the high degree of site fidelity. As a part of my ArcGIS class at the University of Tampa, I mapped both depredated nests and protected nests across the entire 1.2-mile span. This is an aggregate of all the activity from years 2008 to 2020. This data indicates the areas with the highest usage are in sections 7 and 8. This is particularly significant due to the fact that only areas 1 through 6 were searched from years 2008 to 2014. Then areas 7 through 9 were added in the search. In preparing this data, I realized that there were quite a few errors in the GPS waypoints. Consequently, for this year's data collection sheets, we are putting the first 3 numbers for the GPS waypoints. We are hoping this will make the data sheets more user-friendly and more accurate. This chart is a compilation of the yield of hatching from protected nests. This trend seems to indicate a growth percentage of unfertilized eggs in each nest. This will be important to continue our study, if possible, since it could can be indicative of the early effects of climate change or other challenges facing the males in this population. In the early years of the study efforts were placed on the times of the new and full moon. This is clearly indicates a preference in nesting during the third quarter moon.
And now our trends that we're still working on and also thinking of working on, we've noticed that the older turtles seem to come out first in the season. So we will be going back through our previous data and also recording the data more carefully to indicate that. We also have been noticing that we need to start investigating predation at the point of hatching. Last year, we did a quick scan of a small area and found 20 predated nests, and now these were right at the time of hatching. The high site fidelity throughout the years, we're going to continue. The other thing is climate change and its effect on the populations. We have more unfertilized eggs. Does that mean there's fewer males? There's more maggot activity, and what possible conditions are contributing to that? And we're also working to record better temperature, rainfall, wind, barometric pressure, etc. The difference in the years were partially affected, and this is what makes it hard to sometimes come up with this, is we have greater effort from year to year, the days and times in the field. So you can't always look at 2008 and put it against 2020 and come out with a reasonable expectation. There's also an increase in coordinators and volunteers, and the population did indicate a strong recovery in 2012, which was exactly 8 years after the cottages were removed from West Meadow Beach. The cottages were people's summer respite along the road. We had traffic and people all day and night that the turtles would have to contend with. Now they are nesting in those very spots where those cottages were, and knowing that the site fidelity is so strong for them, they must have been nesting under the houses. So the increase in protected nests in 2012, we had gone from having 3 to 6 nests protected in a year to having 19. And also just even the number of turtles that were spotted that year. Any questions?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nancy and Gabrielle. That was great.
Did we
Super
get it
interesting
done?
stuff.
What a cutie.
We have some questions in the Q&A that I think we can pull up. Let's see. Start from the top here. Does the diet between male and female terrapins vary much since the female terrapins have much larger mouths / beaks?
Yeah, the answer from what I understand is yes. That not surprisingly, female terrapins have both larger mouths and I would assume then slightly stronger jaw muscles that enable them to secure larger prey. And that I haven't really observed this in a while, but from what I remember reading is that I think the younger terrapins and males will, not surprisingly, feed upon smaller prey items, things like barnacles and snails, while females will go for larger mollusks as well as crabs.
And there's evidence too around some of the overwintering and hibernation holes of large clams cracked open in a whole circle around some of them we found last year. So it was really very, very interesting to see. And they were the larger holes. There were smaller holes there that I presume the males had been in that were very, we didn't really see much of anything around those. So they must be doing the small little bites.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Our next question, have terrapin gardens resulted in more nest predation in those areas? kind of placing all the eggs in one place, so to speak?
I'm not sure to answer first, but I think not. I mean, if you look at that slides, at least from my understanding in chatting with like Mass Audubon, who's done these terrapin gardens fairly regularly up on the Cape Cod Peninsula, is that they secure the nests. So they try to, they put in anywhere from milk crates to netting or, cages over the nests to deter predation. So I don't think that the concentration of terrapins using the gardens suffer in that regard. If that wasn't the case, then yeah, I would say that it would be easy pickings for predators to just wipe out in one night or two nights, pretty much all the nests, given the concentration in close proximity. But the fact that they are protected generally, I think, as a rule, and that was factored in. I think I've been reading about this, that they knew they really have to take the extra step to try to protect the nests because of that the concentration.
And we had also done some work with our nests that were protected, that when we uncovered them, we sort of held the babies for a couple of days till their yolk sac disappeared so that they were less attractive. And that seemed to help our survival rate of our babies, because we had observed, Eileen Gurley, the park ranger, had observed one morning a fox standing over a nest as it was hatching and eating them. It was like a fast food bar, she said. So it's really, something that if we can do something to just give them that extra little breather, that they're a little less attractive or drawing the predators in, So I don't know if they do anything like that, but I know some of them do turtle releases. So I'm presuming they're getting them maybe from these protected nests and releasing them when they're, more likely to be able to hide and survive.
Right.
All right, thank you. What is the best way to identify a terrapin?
By looking at it, they're pretty distinctive. If you are canoeing or kayaking, in one of the embayments on Long Island, most times if you see a little bobbing cork at the surface, it's going to be a terrapin. Sometimes you'll see their bodies come up. Certainly, I live in Setauket, and I see them in again Conscience Bay and Setauket Harbor, and so they're pretty visible. I mean, and in that kind of environment, you really don't see snapping turtles as often. They're more found in even more freshwater environments, and they have slightly larger heads, and just at the top shell. Again, the carapace is very different on a terrapin than it is on a snapper. Their body shape is very, very different. If you see them on land, I think it'd really be kind of hard to confuse the two if you look at a side by side image of each. Terrapins again have that beautiful scrawling, kind of salt and pepper look on their their neck and their head that the snapping turtles don't have. Just their body, just the two shells are just very, very different. Again, with the Diamondback shoots that snappers don't have.
The other thing that we've noticed in trying to spot them in the field, if you're trying to identify that there's a turtle, you'll see sometimes a very shiny light where the light is bouncing off the shell. It attracts your eye there, particularly in the field. We also see this dark mass on the road that's moving slowly, although sometimes they're basking, so they're not moving that far or that fast. They're just sitting there, I guess, warming up, because that's the other thing, is because they're cold-blooded. Some mornings it's too cold for them to really move much at all, and they can become trapped, so to speak.
Those are great tips. Our next question says, I found an overwintered hatchling in a beach parking lot a few weeks ago. I read they hang out in the rack line for a while, so that's where I placed it. Do you know if this is true?
From my experience, yes, that is true, that they were found in a rack line. They're kind of found in the upper reaches of the marsh, where, as Nancy mentioned before, about really with its vegetative cover where they can hide. So I think that whoever put the young terrapin there, that was not a bad judgment.
Well, the other thing is we strongly recommend that they just put them on as near to the marsh as possible. So where we have the road where the sound is on one side and the marsh is on the other, we tell them to move them to the marsh side, because our indication and Matt Droud's indication from his research was that the terrapin spend their first 3 years as juveniles in the marsh. They don't really go into the water.
Right.
There were several studies in the late 90s that indicated that the 1 to 3 year olds were missing from the population when they did studies throughout Long Island. And they were very concerned about the possibility of a crash in the population, what would happen to our juveniles. And Matt Droud was out in the marsh in the winter and was turning over some marsh grasses and found clumps of babies there. And we have observed them there ourselves too. Yeah. And,
You know what I mean? Rack line, clear the rack line.
Yeah, they should be, if at all possible, on the nearer the marsh, because they have the right water conditions there, as far as not as salty as but they are adaptable too, which is very amazing too. We did find some juveniles in between the rack line and the road at West Meadow. The past 2 summers, we've found probably 1-year-olds in that area.
Yeah.
And they were in an area where it was very bushy and damp, and similar to what you might find in the marsh.
I can also add that I participated in the Northeast Working Group meeting that took place maybe a month and a half or so ago. One of the papers presented, based on research in Cape Cod, which surprised me, I didn't know, documented actually the very young terrapins going upland and actually overwintering in, I think it was for like a farm fields or old fields, which
right.
I didn't know they did that. But so one wonder, like you just said, Nancy, the kind of habitat you've seen them in. I wonder if in some cases they do that on Long Island.
Yeah, well, it's definite that, they are trying to always get to the marsh when they're crossing that road there, if they've been laid on the other side. But then this past 2 years, we have found, 1-year-olds in that wooded area between the rack line and the road. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking it probably mimics, the marsh being damp and so on. Yeah. So we always just tell people to just get them close to the marsh, and they'll do the rest, and so they're out of danger, right, where no one's going to run them over with a car or step on them or whatever. And that does happen.
That's great advice. Thank you. My last question looks like, are there opportunities for high school marine science students to become involved in this research?
We have many high school students involved, and they're starting to work right now. And we are going to be running the Flax Pond Summer Research Institute starting on July 6th and going to July 16th. And if they email me and Grant at flaxpondfriends.org and tell me they're interested, I'll send them the link to register, and we will be putting out a QR code for everyone who's interested in registering.
It's a great opportunity for high school students.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Her brother was involved. That's how she found out about us.
Oh, that's so great. Very nice.
Yeah. But we also have people who are just occasional volunteers, high school students. But the Flax Pond Institute is more of a research. We analyze the different species that are out there and do counts and water quality testing. We do all kinds of things. So we work with the Flax Pond Lab and do some of the work here. We've done invasive species. We've done horseshoe crabs. We did an analysis of the juvenile horseshoe crab population in Flax Pond itself, and compared two different areas of two different tidal pools that had different substrate. It was very, very interesting.
Just volunteering on a normal day, all students of all ages are recommended and can come. They just have to be accompanied by an adult over the age of 21,
18.
18.
In other words, if you're under 18, you do have to have someone with you over 18. What the Flax Pond Summer Institute, that's not a requirement, because I have student interns who are there that assist and provide any needed supervision. It is not a camp program, though. It's a lot of work and hot, mucky. It's what you really would encounter, though, as a marine scientist. Gives you a good taste.
And let me just add, the work that you're doing, obviously the app, I mean, high school students at that level could participate. They've got to do
Oh, definitely, yeah.
research, and just that, again, we really want to try to gain as much information as we can about distribution of terrapins. So high school students or spend a lot of time at beaches could be really helpful in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially when you're marking in locations of potential road crossings and mortality events. So when we learn more about those situations, then we can take the proper, precautionary steps to make those mortality events happen a lot less, of course. So using those terrapin tubings that John showed earlier. So all that information that you submit into these surveys is really useful when we are planning and trying to protect this species. And I just had one question left. I think, John, you answered it. I'm just going to bring it to the group, though. Who has notched terrapins on the South Shore? We found and tagged one a couple of days ago. We'd like to know where and when it may have been notched. So, John, you said maybe Russ Burke or one of his students.
The only person I know doing that kind of work, and I'm not sure it is Russ, but I would guess Dr. Burke or one of his many students, his army of students. If I had to hazard a guess, that would be my guess.
All right. So I believe that's all of the questions. Jimena, I don't know if you saw any in the chat or anything, right?
No, we're good. But I pasted Nancy's email there. So anybody who's interested in helping out can email her there.
Awesome, thank you. So since it is 3:11, we can go ahead and wrap up, I think. I just want to take a moment to thank our panelists, Nancy, Gabby, and John. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge with us. Thank you, Jimena, my co-host and the co-creator of Community Science LI, for helping me moderate today and keeping track of, the timing and all the great questions we received. And finally, thank you all for joining us to learn more about terrapins on Long Island. We learned how to monitor them, how the information we gather as community scientists can help protect their populations. So I hope you learned as much as I did today. If you have any questions that weren't answered, please feel free to reach out to us. There will be a follow-up email with all of our contact information, all the links to the resources we shared today, including a link to the recording that will be up shortly after we conclude. So thank you all again, and we hope you can join us for the last webinar in the Community Science LI series, which is on July 21st, and that will cover Eastern coyote monitoring. So we hope to see you there. Don't forget to register for that, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for arranging this.
Great job, you and Jimena. Thank you.
Thanks for participating, guys.
Yes.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.